The phone on Mark Delaney's wrist wouldn't stop buzzing, like it was panicking for him. A calendar reminder flashed on the screen, pool party, 2 p.m., and right under it a text from his assistant, running 10 late, press is here. Mark stood frozen at the edge of a backyard pool in Palo Alto, one hand gripping a paper cup that used to be hot coffee and was now just sad and cold. The sound around him was too much all at once. Laughter. Splashing. A Bluetooth speaker playing a clean pop song at a volume that felt too loud for a sunny afternoon. Parents pretending to relax while watching their kids like hawks. Somebody's drone camera hovering over the patio because someone always had to record everything. And then Mark saw his son. Noah was 10. Small for his age, all elbows and sharp little movements. He stood near the shallow end with his shoulders tight, and his hands clenched in the way Mark had learned to recognize as Noah trying not to fall apart. Noah's swim shirt was bright blue, the kind with a little shark fin on the back, and he kept rubbing the seam at the collar between his fingers over and over like it was an anchor. Mark started walking toward him, already rehearsing the calm voice. "Hey bud, you're good, you don't have to." A kid rushed past, running too close to the wet tiles. There was a shove, or maybe it was just a careless bump, but it hit Noah like a sudden storm. Noah's feet slid. His arms flailed out in a stiff, startled way. Mark's mouth went dry so fast it felt like his tongue was stuck to the roof of it. Noah tipped forward. The cup in Mark's hand crumpled as he squeezed it without meaning to. Cold coffee spilled onto his shoes. The sound of it didn't matter. Nothing mattered but the moment Noah's body tilted, the way his eyes went wide, the way he didn't shout because Noah rarely shouted when he was scared. His fear was quiet, contained, locked behind his ribs. Mark lunged, but he was a half step too far, and his brain did that thing where it tried to slow time while his body refused to move fast enough. Someone screamed, a short sharp noise that cut through the music. And before Mark could even reach the edge, a girl in a black one-piece swimsuit moved like she'd been waiting for this exact second. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look around for permission. She just dropped to her knees, grabbed Noah's wrist with both hands, and pulled him back from the angle where he would have fallen in. Her palms squeaked on his wet skin. Noah's body jerked like he might pull away, like the contact was too much, but she adjusted instantly, not tighter, not rougher, just steady, like holding onto someone without trapping them. "It's okay," she said, low and clear, right near his ear. "You're on the ground now. You're safe." Noah's breathing was fast, shallow, the kind that sounded like a broken fan. His eyes darted. The speaker. The water. The people leaning in. The drone. The girl looked up at the hovering drone like it personally offended her. "Turn that off," she snapped, voice sharp now. "This is not a show." Mark didn't know who owned the drone, but he saw it wobble and then rise quickly and drift away. The crowd's noise softened, like someone had lowered the volume on the whole afternoon. Mark finally reached them. He crouched down so he wasn't towering over anyone. His hands shook, but he kept them close to his own body because he knew surprising touches could make things worse for Noah. "You did amazing," Mark said to his son, in the voice he used when he was trying not to sound afraid. "You're okay. I'm right here." Noah didn't look at him. He stared at the concrete. His fingers were still searching for the seam at his collar. The girl stayed kneeling, not crowding him, not talking too much. Just existing like a calm wall between Noah and the chaos. Mark swallowed. "Thank you," he said, but it came out thin, like his throat couldn't support the words. The girl glanced at him. She was around Noah's age, maybe a little older. Braids pulled back tight, water beating on her shoulders. Her expression wasn't proud or smug. It was just serious, focused, like she didn't want applause, like she wanted adults to do better. "People need to stop running by the pool," she said. "And they need to stop acting like he's invisible." Mark flinched because it landed right on the sore part of him he tried to ignore. That even with all the money, all the power, all the fancy therapy plans and school meetings, he still couldn't control the world's carelessness. Around them, someone muttered, "It was an accident," like that should erase the panic that had just flooded Mark's body. Mark looked at the wet tiles, at the way water made everything slippery and unpredictable. He looked at Noah's small body, still wound tight as a spring. He thought about how he could buy safety systems for 1,000 pools and still not buy the thing Noah needed most. People who paid attention. The girl shifted her weight and spoke to Noah again, softer.
"Do you want to go somewhere quiet?"
Noah's eyes flicked toward her face for the first time. Just a glance, quick as a blink, but it was there. Mark felt something in his chest loosen, just a little. Noah's lips moved, barely audible. "Quiet," he whispered. Mark nodded. "Yeah, quiet." He stood and looked around the yard. The party setup was expensive in a way most people wouldn't recognize at first glance. The catered trays. The sleek patio furniture. The staff hired to make it all look effortless. It should have felt like success. Instead it felt like a stage he'd built that his son never wanted to stand on. "Inside," Mark said to Noah, gentle. "We can go inside." Noah took a step, then paused.
His hands twisted together. The girl got up too, keeping a respectful distance.
"The sliding door sticks," she said, pointing. "You gotta lift it a little." Mark blinked. "How do you know that?" She shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. "My mom cleans houses around here sometimes. I've been in this one." The words hit Mark in a way he didn't expect. This backyard, this pool, this entire life, so normal to him that he stopped seeing it, was someone else's work, someone else's world, someone else's long days. Mark watched as Noah moved toward the house, carefully, as if the ground might betray him again. The girl walked a few paces behind, not trying to lead, not trying to parent, just making sure he didn't get swallowed by the noise. Mark realized he didn't even know her name. And somehow, that felt like the most important thing he'd ignored all day. He followed them inside, leaving the music and laughter behind, and the silence of the cool hallway wrapped around them like a blanket. Noah's shoulders dropped a fraction. His breathing started to slow. Mark looked at the girl again. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "Ari." Mark nodded, holding the name like it mattered. Because it did. Outside, the party kept going like nothing had happened. Inside, Mark stood next to his son in the quiet and understood something he didn't want to admit. For all his money, for all his status, he had been building the wrong kind of protection. And a kid named Ari had just shown him what real attention looked like. The house felt different once the sliding door closed behind them. The noise from the pool party faded into a dull hum, like it belonged to another world entirely. The air inside was cooler, and the lights were softer, set to some automatic evening mode Mark barely remembered choosing. Noah stood just inside the hallway, not moving, his eyes adjusting. He leaned slightly toward the wall, pressing his shoulder against it the way he did when his body needed something solid to hold on to. His breathing was still uneven, but it wasn't racing anymore.
Mark crouched again, slow and deliberate.
"You wanna go to your room?" he asked. "Or the den?" Noah didn't answer right away. His fingers went back to the collar seam. He glanced toward the den, where the big couch sat under a window that looked out onto the backyard. He shook his head once. "Room," he said. "Okay," Mark replied. "Room it is." Ari stood a few steps away, hands clasped in front of her, suddenly unsure of where she fit now that the crisis had passed. The confidence she'd shown by the pool had quieted. Now she looked like a kid again, standing in someone else's house, wondering if she'd crossed a line. "You don't have to," Mark started, then stopped himself. He didn't want to dismiss her by accident.
"You're welcome to walk with us if you want."
"Or you can head back out." Whatever you're comfortable with. Ari looked at Noah, not Mark. I can walk, she said.
Just to the door.
Noah didn't protest, which Mark noted immediately. Usually Noah resisted unfamiliar people in his space. The fact that he didn't pull away felt important, like a fragile agreement no one should rush. They moved down the hallway together. Mark noticed how Ari matched Noah's pace without thinking about it. She didn't rush ahead. She didn't lag behind. She just walked, letting the space between them stay easy. At Noah's bedroom door, Mark paused. This is good, he said softly. Thanks. Ari nodded. Okay. She turned to leave, then hesitated. He did good, she said, not looking back at Mark. He didn't freak out. He just needed it to stop. Mark swallowed. Yeah, he said. He did. Ari walked away toward the living room, her wet footprints fading on the hardwood as she went. Mark closed Noah's door partway, leaving it cracked like Noah preferred. Noah went straight to his weighted blanket and sat on the floor, pulling it around his shoulders. His breathing slowed even more. He rocked slightly, eyes closed now.
You want the lights lower?
Mark asked. Noah nodded. Mark adjusted them and sat down across from him, back against the bed. He stayed quiet. Silence, when chosen, was one of the few things that reliably helped. After a minute, Noah opened his eyes. She was loud, he said. Mark almost smiled, but he kept it inside. She was, he agreed. But not in a bad way. Noah thought about that. She told the flying thing to go away. She did. That was good, Noah said. Mark felt the tightness in his chest shift. Yeah, he said. That was good. When Noah finally lay back and pulled the blanket over his head, Mark stepped out and closed the door carefully. The party was still going. People laughed a little too loudly now, probably drinking more than they meant to.
Someone clinked a glass.
Mark scanned the room, feeling strangely distant from it all, like he was watching a scene from behind glass. He spotted Ari near the kitchen island, standing next to a woman in scrubs who looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the party. The woman had her hand on Ari's shoulder, not possessive, just grounding. Mark walked over, aware of eyes following him. He knew how people looked at him. Curious. Careful.
Expectant.
Hi, he said to the woman. I'm Mark. I know, she replied, polite but flat. I'm Denise. Ari's mom. Thank you, Mark said, meaning it in a way that felt bigger than manners. She helped my son. A lot. Denise looked at Ari, then back at Mark. She said he almost fell in. Mark nodded. Yeah. Denise's jaw tightened slightly. Ari doesn't like pools, she said. Too loud. Too many people. But she saw him and, she shrugged. She's good at noticing when someone's overwhelmed.
Mark exhaled slowly.
So is my son, he said. Or he would be, if people let him be. Denise studied him for a moment, like she was deciding how honest to be. Most people don't slow down, she said. Kids notice that faster than adults. Ari shifted. Mom, she muttered. It's okay, Denise said. I'm not mad. Mark felt an urge to fix something, to offer something. He hated that instinct in himself, the way his brain tried to translate gratitude into money or opportunity. Instead, he asked, Can I get you something to drink? Water.
Soda.
Water's fine, Denise said. As Mark filled 2 glasses, he noticed Ari watching the hallway that led to Noah's room. Not staring. Just checking, like you might check on a storm after it passes. He's okay, Mark said gently. Ari nodded. I know. They stood there for a moment, the 3 of them, surrounded by noise that no longer felt welcoming. Mark realized something uncomfortable and true. 4 years, he'd been fighting Noah's world, trying to make it safer by controlling it. But Ari hadn't controlled anything. She'd just paid attention. She'd stepped in without needing permission or praise. And part of Mark resisted that idea, because it meant admitting how often he'd missed what was right in front of him. When Denise and Ari eventually said they were heading out, Mark walked them to the door. "I'd like to keep in touch," he said, careful with his tone. "Not for anything official. Just as people." Denise considered him, then nodded. "Okay," she said. "As people." After they left, Mark stood in the quiet foyer for a long time, listening to the party fade again behind him. For the first time that day, he felt like something small but real had shifted.
Nota miracle.
Just a connection he hadn't planned for. The house was quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar to Mark. Not the clean, engineered quiet of a late night after meetings and emails, but a deeper one, the kind that settles after something emotional has passed through and left a mark. The party had ended hours ago. Staff had come and gone. The last car had pulled away from the curb. Mark stood alone in the kitchen, rinsing cups that didn't need rinsing, his mind replaying the moment by the pool over and over, like a short clip he couldn't pause. He kept seeing Noah's body tilt forward.
The way Tim stretched.
The way he'd been too far away. Mark turned off the faucet and leaned against the counter. His reflection stared back at him from the dark window.
40-something.
Expensive haircut. The kind of face people trusted with money and decisions. The kind of face people assumed had control. He didn't feel in control. Upstairs, Noah's room light was still on. Mark hadn't gone in yet. He knew better than to rush. But he also knew that avoiding things was his habit when he didn't like what he might hear. His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't work. It was a message from the school. A reminder about the upcoming IEP review meeting. Accommodations. Goals. Progress. Mark exhaled through his nose. He'd sat in dozens of those meetings, nodding while people used careful language to talk around his son instead of to him. He'd signed checks for specialists. Sensory tools.
Private evaluations.
Every solution always came with a price tag, and Mark paid it gladly, because paying was easy. It was measurable. It let him believe he was doing something. What felt harder was admitting that none of it stopped the world from moving too fast. He walked upstairs quietly and knocked on Noah's door with his knuckle, soft. "Hey, bud. Can I come in?" There was a pause. Then, "Okay."
Mark pushed the door open slowly.
Noah lay on his bed under the weighted blanket, the shark fin on his swim shirt now replaced by an old gray hoodie he liked. The lights were dim, just one lamp on the dresser. Mark sat on the floor like he always did. Same spot.
Same distance. You feel a little better, Mark said.
Not a question. Noah nodded.
My head is tired.
I get that. They sat in silence for a while. Mark waited. He'd learned that Noah spoke when he was ready, not when prompted. After a few minutes, Noah said, "You were scared." Mark's chest tightened. "Yeah," he admitted. "I was." "You looked like when the car alarm went off," Noah added. "But worse." Mark swallowed. "I thought I should have been closer." Noah considered that. "You were talking to the phone." Mark nodded. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain. "Yeah." Noah shifted under the blanket. "People don't look where they're going," he said. "They just move." The words landed heavier than Mark expected. "You're right," he said quietly. Noah turned his head slightly, just enough to look at Mark. Ari looked. Mark felt it again, that small release in his chest. "She did. She didn't grab me like this," Noah said, clenching his fists tight.
She did it like this. A demonstrated loser, Kentroulf.
Mark watched, heart aching. She paid attention, he said. Noah nodded once. I like that. Mark sat with that thought long after Noah closed his eyes again. Later that night, when the house was fully asleep, Mark sat alone in his office. The room was lined with awards he didn't remember earning. Magazine covers with his face on them. Headlines about vision and leadership. He opened his laptop, not to work, but to write an email he'd been avoiding for months. It was to Noah's school. Short.
Direct.
No legal language.
No existen escapes.
He asked for changes. Smaller class transitions. Fewer unstructured events. Clearer boundaries around supervision. Not suggestions. Needs. His finger hovered over send. A familiar voice in his head whispered about being difficult. About reputation. About not wanting to be that parent. Then he thought about Noah standing by the pool, hands clenched, invisible until it almost went wrong. Mark hit send. The next day, he found himself doing something else unfamiliar.
E texti Denise.
Just checking in. Hope you and Ari got home okay. The reply came a few minutes later. We did. Ari keeps saying your house is too loud, but your son is nice. Mark smiled despite himself. He typed back, she's right on both counts. They exchanged a few more messages.
Nothing heavy. Nothing formal.
Just small human notes about tired kids and busy days. And somewhere between those messages, Mark felt the ground under him shift again.
De breaking point bastante dramatic.
There was no speech.
No gran realización.
It was quieter than that. It was the understanding that he couldn't buy awareness. He couldn't outsource attention. He couldn't protect Noah by building higher walls if he didn't also change how he showed up. For the first time in a long while, Mark didn't feel helpless. He felt responsible. And strangely, that felt better. The change didn't announce itself. There was no morning where Mark woke up feeling fixed or suddenly wiser. Life kept moving at the same speed it always had. Emails stacked up. Meetings ran long. Noah still struggled with transitions and noise and days that didn't go the way he expected. But small things started to shift. Mark began leaving his phone face down more often.
No tal de time.
Just enough to notice when Noah entered a room, when his shoulders tensed, when his eyes searched for an exit. Mark started asking fewer questions and making more observations. He learned to say, this feels like a lot, instead of, what's wrong? It didn't solve everything.
Sometimes Noah still shut down. Sometimes Mark still missed things.
But the space between them felt less crowded by noise. At school, the changes Mark had asked for didn't come easily. There were meetings.
Pushback.
Explanations wrapped in polite language. But Mark stayed present in those conversations in a way he hadn't before. He spoke plainly. He talked about Noah, not metrics. He listened, really listened, when teachers described what they saw. One afternoon, weeks later, Mark sat in his car outside a coffee shop, engine off, watching Noah through the window. Noah sat at a small table with a hot chocolate, hands wrapped around the cup, steam fogging his glasses. He liked this place because it was predictable. Same menu. Same barista. Same soft music. Ari sat across from him, legs tucked under her chair, sketching something in a notebook. Denise sat nearby, scrolling on her phone but glancing up every few seconds, the way parents do when they're pretending not to watch. Mark stayed in the car a moment longer than necessary, letting himself observe without intervening. Inside, Noah said something.
Ari laughed, a quick sound, not loud.
Noah smiled, small but real. Mark felt a familiar pull in his chest, that urge to label the moment as progress, as success. He resisted it. He let it just be what it was. When he finally went inside, Noah looked up and nodded. Not excited. Not overwhelmed. Just acknowledging. That was a good joke, Ari said to Mark, like he'd walked into the middle of something ordinary. Mark smiled. I'll take your word for it. They sat together for a while. Talked about nothing important. School schedules.
A new movie coming out.
How the weather kept changing its mind. Later, as they walked back to their cars, Denise paused. I've noticed something, she said. Mark waited. You don't hover, she said. You watch, but you don't rush in. Mark thought about that. I used to think hovering was protecting. Denise nodded. A lot of people do. That night, after Noah went to bed, Mark stood in the hallway outside his son's room. The door was cracked. Soft breathing filled the space. Mark rested his hand on the doorframe, feeling the solidness of it. He thought about how close he'd come to losing something he couldn't replace. Not Noah himself, but trust. The sense of safety that came from knowing someone would notice before things went wrong. He knew he would mess up again. He knew there would be other pools, other crowded rooms, other moments where the world moved faster than Noah could. But he also knew this. Attention was a practice, not a personality trait. Empathy wasn't automatic. It was built, moment by moment, through choices that didn't look impressive from the outside. Weeks later, Mark was back at the same pool, this time early in the morning. No party. No music. Just water reflecting the sky. Noah sat on a lounge chair nearby, feet dangling, humming softly. Mark sat beside him, close enough without crowding. A neighbor walked past and smiled. Quiet today, she said. Yeah, Mark replied. It's better this way. Noah dipped his toes into the water, watching the ripples spread and fade. It listens now, he said. Mark followed his gaze. Yeah, he said. It does. They stayed there like that for a while, neither rushing the moment. Mark knew life wouldn't turn into something perfect or easy. But he also knew that paying attention had already changed the shape of their days. Sometimes the biggest difference doesn't come from power or money or control. Sometimes it comes from finally looking up.